Launching Leaders within Queensland Rugby is a really exciting moment for us. The concept is about sitting down and talking leadership with people connected to the Queensland Rugby Union in many different ways, from board members, commercial partners and donors, to former players, coaches and people connected with the community game. The series is brought to you by our official luxury hotel partner, Amora Brisbane. It's been a privilege to work with Rob, Nikki, Tessa and the Amora team this year, and we're so excited to continue working with them as presenting partner of Leaders within Queensland Rugby and the Amora Centreline Lounge on Queensland Reds Super Rugby game days in 2025. If you haven't checked out the beautifully refurbished Amora Brisbane, you need to. Whether you're travelling from overseas, interstate, within Queensland, or you're just wanting a staycation for that special occasion, Amora Brisbane is perfectly placed in the heart of the CBD. We've been thinking about the concept of Leaders within Queensland Rugby for a long time, and to be able to bring it to life with 12 outstanding guests across 11 episodes was really enjoyable. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to sit down for an extended conversation with Sarah Zeljko, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. She brings great energy, enthusiasm and experience to the topic of leadership, and I think you'll get plenty out of this conversation today. Sarah Zeljko, thank you for joining us on Leaders Inside Queensland Rugby. Just initially, can you tell us a little bit about your connection to rugby?
My personal connection to rugby is, although my last name is Zeljko, my maiden name was East. So I'm from old rugby, Churchy Boy, Fraser East. And actually anybody who knows Queensland back in the day, we're the old McDonald East. So a lot of our spectators would have gone to Mackin East. It was like the Myers and David Jones of its era. And so I was the firstborn. And so it was just expected that I was to love rugby. However, I'm not going to show my age, but back in my day, I went to St Hilda's and we weren't allowed to play rugby. But my brothers were at TSS and I just grew up, and then I went to Ballymore, and I'm looking at Ballymore right now. So I've got a long association with rugby, and now I'm on the Queensland Rugby Union board and have been since March. So that was the OGM.
And it's not the only board you're currently serving on.
No.
I did ask you earlier if you were a professional board director, but you do have pursuits outside of that as well. But governance roles are something that you've been doing for quite some time.
So I'm a construction sort of commercial corporate lawyer by trade. And my old man was a bit of a serial entrepreneur, so I worked out that all the cool jobs were being a lawyer but in companies. So I've worked all my career in big infrastructure businesses, only girl in the room, high vis, working with engineers. So have sort of transitioned to boards early, because being in-house and being the in-house lawyer, I presented to boards and worked with boards. So now I think I've been 15 years working with boards and 6 years full-time. I know I look too young, but I have been full-time non-executive director for about 6 years. But as I said, I do governance consulting and professional mentoring. But my big gig is I am the chair of Energy Queensland, which is 9,000 people, $30 billion in assets, and 1.7 million kilometres of poles and wires. So massive organisation. So the old Energex Nergon.
Today we're going to talk primarily about leadership, but I just want to go back to something you said just there, because I find it quite interesting. Talking about often being the only female in the room, was that something that you found challenging, or did you see it more as an opportunity and found it empowering?
I didn't know any different. I think what I learnt very early was, and I often joke that I don't think that my voice used to be this deep, but I wanted to be the voice in the room. So I think I worked, and my first job was mining, and I reckon my first deal was against Xstrata doing a $300 million drafting a contract. So I was thrown in the deep end, big monopoly money. So I think I learnt very quickly just to bring your best self, and I, if anything, tried to ungenderify myself so that I could be that voice. So that was probably the struggle, but then later on probably the opportunity, because I'd worked with men and men were in the big roles. Even now I think female directors on boards is just hitting 40%. So, I was really still bleeding edge in that time and have been all through my career. And the sisterhood that sort of, is in non-executive director world and leadership world, we always talk about the struggles, but we do get the opportunities of, I think, sharing the stories. We bring a different sort of emotional sort of leadership qualities than men do. And I think the whole quota versus merit conversation is going away as more females sit in leadership roles and board roles. But we've got a long way to go. Absolutely.
There's probably a bit of a perception about how blokey some of those industries might have been, throughout your time coming up as well. Were you exposed to any great leaders and mentors within those businesses who possibly didn't even manage you in any different way, although you were the only woman in the room?
I didn't know to ask for a mentor, and I didn't even know what a mentor gave. And I remember learning later on about sponsorship versus mentorship, which I think is something that lots of people, like mentoring is do this, don't do that. Sponsorship is Sarah's really fantastic, I'm going to put her forward for a role. So I didn't know to ask to be mentored, and I didn't ask to be put up for roles from a sponsorship point of view. But I did have, there was a great CFO that counselled me quite early in my career, and I remember having a moment where I was that really keen, lawyer who wanted to know the answer all the time, and he pulled me aside at one point and sort of said, Sarah, because I'd always be like, oh yes, I know the answer to that, because I'm the in-house lawyer and so I know everything, and I'm 27 and a half. And one of the best bits of advice I got early on was, Sarah, I'd like your considered advice, not your first advice. And that taught me a lot about sitting and somebody and that sort of gravitas around, that's a really interesting question. I'll go away and do some research and come back to you. You might know the answer 7, but there's a piece around how you bring the delivery of your message and not appearing too keen. So that was the biggest, probably first aha moment for me. And he was probably the closest thing I had to a mentor, because he would actually pull me aside and give me feedback, which I never got in the past.
Leadership, I'm going to go out on a limb and presume it came quite naturally to you. Was it something that you actively sought, even back at St Hilda's, and as you...
I was a prefect. I was all of that stuff. Of course I was. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
Well, I guess with that, what characteristics do you think you had that led you towards pursuing those types of opportunities?
I think... so there's a couple of things in that. I think leadership, going back to what I define leadership as, it's trust, and I think trust comes with having done something. And so delegating and actually giving that trust away and sitting in the uncomfortableness of leading is a fascinating concept, and I'm learning more, I think, and you continue to learn, because true leadership is telling everybody that, you surround yourself with clever people and you let them run their own desk, and you performance manage them in that you give them expectations so they have clarity of role. But that takes a while you've got to have done the job yourself. You've got to be able to have those frank and fearless conversations, which takes guts. And then also you have to trust them that they'll, and I always used to joke, and I used to have a great, team of lawyers, and I always used to say, don't ever, just make sure I know enough to be dangerous. Because the in-house lawyer becomes what they call a general counsel. And I love that, because general counsel feels like you've got to be generally across everything. So you sit uncomfortably between sort of your second and fourth rib because you can't deep dive. And what do you do in a crisis? You want to go to the tools. So leadership is feeling uncomfortable but trusting the people that are around you, that they're going to give you the information that you need to get into a room to do the stuff that you need to do. So there's that for me is leadership. And so that's how that's taken me on my journey. But of course I had to learn how to do it first, and then I had to learn to let go and actually trust people. So if that answers your question.
It does, and it leads me nicely into the next, which is more around if you can recall any specific occasions throughout your journey where you got it wrong as a leader, or changes you've had to make to your leadership style that stand out.
I think it is the letting go piece. I think it's in a crisis, not going to type, not just thinking, I'll just give it to me. Because you have to, a leader for me is about the hearts and minds. A leader is which hill are we running up and how high, so that, people want to come and work with you, people know where you're going, people have that clarity of role. And when there's a burning platform, it's very easy to just sort of go, just do it myself, or, micromanage or check it. And that's a cultural piece that disempowers your team. It makes it makes it difficult for them to feel as though they can make mistakes. You know, it's that fail and fail fast piece. So there's also a vulnerability that you have to give about the stuff-ups that you make and the storytelling that you make. So for me, it's also about teaching them your leadership style, because every good team manages up, and showing them how to manage up to make my life easier so I won't get in their way is, you know, such an interesting balance that you do. So I've made huge amounts of mistakes and performance managed the wrong way and not had the frank and fearless conversations. I think that's the hardest thing. Nobody teaches you how to be clearer about the role and clear what happens when you don't do the role. And that's the upfront stuff that took me a while, because you just assume everybody will know. And then when you don't give people the 5 things that you want, then you can't get cranky with them if they don't do the 5 things and you don't explain that. So I think that took me a while. And I think that's about stopping and having those difficult upfront pathways, which create the best leadership teams, because then they know how to show off. But they also know if I'm going to come and say something to them, they know why. They know, number 4 or 5, yeah, I really stuffed that one up.
Right in the heart of the Brisbane CBD, Amora Hotel is perfectly placed whether your stay is for business or for leisure. Thanks to the Amora Hotel Brisbane team for their support of leaders within Queensland Rugby and the QRU more broadly. Make it Amora and love the difference. How do you create the right balance of surrounding yourself with a leadership team that perhaps some of them have similar traits and similar styles of work to yourself, a similar approach, and others perhaps might have strengths in areas you don't, but might not match your energy or your commitment or other characteristics?
Isn't that the big problem in leadership though? People tend to hire themselves. And so it's the emotional intelligence and working out how to have conversations with different people differently. And I think probably being around engineers and males, I've had to adapt, because it's very easy to find a type A Sarah. I can smell a type A Sarah anywhere, but it is the fact that I'll need a range of people. And I never had executive coaches. I think that's probably one of the things that I would have liked to have had, because the further you get up in your career, the harder it is to deal with Frank. And Frank's just, he communicates differently. He's not, and there's that disconnect where, Sally's so much easier. Oh, sorry, I keep touching your microphone. And so you've got to take away that bias and the bias of the ease of the way that you like to be managed up to facilitate that. I think sometimes is hard. And my step change was when I had an executive coach. So I could say, Frank's really, just to have that sort of sounding block. So that probably, rather than a mentor, was the first step change in dealing with different leadership styles and how I could adapt mine, and having the conversations where I could say, I really stuffed that up, and I think, Frank thinks that I'm an idiot now, and having the horrors about it.
You've mentioned managing up quite a few times. Can you define in a little bit more detail what that means, or perhaps if there are any techniques you could pass on to others, perhaps to aspiring leaders to employ when they're managing up?
Isn't there a saying, what my manager finds interesting, I find fascinating? It's always realising that the best way that you can not only get to your next job but be successful in your current role is to work out, because every organisation has a strategic plan, and then KPIs sort of cascade out of that. So it's very easy to do the busy work. It's very easy to delete all the emails and do all the easy stuff and not do the hard work. But managing up is so important for giving your manager putting them in the room where they can answer the questions, so they trust you, and the more they trust you, the more they'll give you breadth of role. Also, what you think is important may not be important to the organisation, so making sure you're not doing the busy work because it's the cool stuff that you want to do. Managing up is also making sure that, because you have to kind of sell yourself. I mean, this is part of your leadership journey, is knowing your value proposition, knowing what your ask is, and letting them know that. And the only way that you can do that is by showing that you are good at making them look good, not too good that they will never want to lose you and never promote you. You've got to be careful with that too. And I find, I work a lot with mentoring sort of middle to senior executives, and it's a headspace to get into, not just doing the busy work, but making your manager look good and making the organisation look good, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for.
Do you conform to the concept that you should lead into your strengths rather than your weaknesses, or do you think you need to be chipping away at your weaknesses to try and eliminate or reduce them?
I spend my life saying that sounds really hard, I should do that. I started doing governance consulting through Board Matters. So Elizabeth Jamieson is a bit of a legend in Brisbane. She started it up. She's been on a range of boards. I think she was 23 years on Girls Grammar, RACQ chair, extraordinary. Anyway, so I'd had her come and do work for me in all of my roles, and she said to me, "Zeljko, come and do some governance consulting with me." And I said, I can't consult. I've been consulted to all my career. I'm not a slide pack type of girl and whatever else. She said, "That's why you're perfect." Anyway, so I followed her around, and she showed me how to do a board performance review and a risk appetite statement, and and facilitating a strategic planning day. It was so far out of my comfort zone, but that's the cool stuff. That's the leaning into it. It sounds really hard, so I'm going to do it. I call it my high functioning anxiety. It's great. But if you're not doing that, and if you're not pushing yourself, then it becomes Groundhog Day, and it's just opened up so many opportunities, and it just makes you think differently about everything that you do. So no, I'm always and you don't want to be doing the same stuff all the time. I mean, I'm now 6 years into a board career, and I've got the next 10 to 20 years of the coolest stuff, working across ranges of organisations, and the only way I think I can do that now is because I've lent into that that personal risk appetite of being a commercial, lawyer that was more commercial than I was, that sort of strict legal. And so, now I can kind of, I work across, I've got an ag board, I've got a rugby board, I've got, water, I've got electricity. It's awesome. It's really cool.
You're very busy.
Yes.
How do you balance, work and life, and do you do a good job? Are there, tools and tips you can pass on to others? Do you have a set of rules in place to try and maintain a good work-life balance?
I have a shite work-life balance because I love what I do. Also, there's lots of people that sort of come to me and sort of say, how did you get a board portfolio? Because it's almost like the secret Mason's handshake, and, how do you get on boards and do whatever else? And I always say to them, I went to the opening of an envelope. Like when I moved from executive world to boards, people have to know who you are. People have to, know how to pronounce Zeljko, and, understand what you'd be like in a room. It's this little microcosm of people who come together for a couple of hours once a month to do something, and the stickiest questions about this organisation and where it should go and where it should sort of sit. So there's a massive trust that's involved in that. So when I decided that I was going to sort of lean in and do board work, I would be out 4 nights a week, and let alone, breakfasts and whatever else, because I'm out there selling myself, why, who am I, why I should be on that board, what I bring, I'm not going to be a black letter lawyer, I'm commercial, and, the story of me and all that sort of stuff. So I have no work balance, because then I started loving it, because then I'm an extrovert anyway, so you get to meet people. Brisbane has become this extraordinary, big enough but small enough town where we all know each other, and the opportunities that come from those sort of situations have just been exponential in my career. So I have no work-life balance. And now as well, I get invited to cool shit, so I also get to go to that.
Do you therefore surround yourself with people who know that have no work-life balance and are okay with that?
It's really funny. So board work is the 3rd and 4th week of the month is where the board pack comes out and all the meetings are, because obviously the CFOs have to do the accounts from the last month in the first 2 weeks. So I literally have mates who know if they want to catch up with me, it's in week 1 or 2 of the month, and week 3 and 4, I'm drinking through the fire hose, I'm reading papers, nights and weekends doesn't make any difference, because you're just doing board packs, working out what you have to do. So Everybody knows, yes.
Sarah Zeljko, it's been fantastic speaking with you today. Thank you for joining us on Leaders Inside Queensland Rugby.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Leaders Within Queensland Rugby, proudly presented by Amora Hotel Brisbane. Head to Apple Podcasts and Spotify to subscribe and get a new episode every week. Or if you can't wait that long, head to the Queensland Reds YouTube page to see all the episodes in one place.